Well, good morning, everybody. I wanted to give you a quick rundown of what's going to be in this video before we get it started. I'm going to cover what happened this weekend, but we're going to put it in the broader context of winter then after that. What I'll follow with is an update on the new kind of 2-week forecast outlook from our models. I also have some great stuff to share with you about some of the new things that the European model has released lately in terms of the artificial intelligence versions of their forecasts. I can't wait to show you that. We then transition into some ideas about where this temperature and precipitation pattern will take us through the month of March. And then I want to do down here in these slides, I want to talk about ocean temperature analysis again. That sparked a lot of comments in the comment section in last week's video, so we're going to cover that here at the very end, and we'll finish with South America. Okay, first animation here is the last 18 hours of satellite, and we're looking here across the United States, and we continue to see what I think is going to be a very active pattern going forward. Now let's go ahead and pause this here. I want to take you back to yesterday. I'm waiting for a good clear day here in the west because I want to see how much snowpack we now have. You can see as I kind of slide this through that there has been some good snow out of Montana. We've now covered parts of the Canadian Prairie with a lot of snow given this huge system that went through over the weekend. And it's just fantastic to see the buildup of late season snow. And I have kind of something important I want to toss out there with all of you. You know, we spend a lot of time at this point in the year, ahead of our main growing season for North America, discussing what the chances are of wet, dry, hot, cold, right? And it's very important for us to just step back and remember that when it comes to agriculture, okay, that's what these videos are about, right? When it comes to agriculture, the main story is, what have you done for me lately? We can't forget that. Because we understand that the way that a crop, a living thing, survives and grows, reproduces, and gives us what we need as a society, as people, it will do everything it can to live. And that's why it's important for us to continually monitor how things are changing in the longer term, looking at our vulnerabilities, looking what could give us the risk, but the reality is that the atmosphere and how quickly the hydrologic cycle turns over is actually critical to the success of any growing season. So these preseason projections I continue to do, I just need you to know that they are broad brush strokes about what we think could happen. And we're trying to look out for those big events, of course, but we have to remember that the atmosphere is always, because of the speed of the hydrologic cycle, what have you done for me lately? So we can have a very, very dry winter, a very dry spring, and perfectly timed rains over a short window in July in my home state of Illinois, and we could hammer out a huge crop. So just keep that in mind as we go forward with this spring forecasting, because we are in a new season, right? All right, I've been talking over the same image for a while. A couple of big things I'm watching. Look at the late day severe convection yesterday in Florida. Look at the low that is just off the Carolina coast. We're going to watch that one very carefully over the next few days. And we've continued to battle this past weekend while the west was getting hammered with snow, 10 feet of it in places in the Sierra Nevada. We watched wildfires in Texas. But there's actually something else in Texas that really caught my eye. And it was this cloud feature right here. And what I think we're seeing here is what happens when you get very strong flow coming off of the higher elevation to the west. It then kind of dips into this area and it bounces, and you end up getting these standing waves in the clouds. And where it's coming back up is right here. And I find this just fascinating to look at. And I just wanted to share that with you today. But what created all of this also gives us this map. So this is our last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. There's your Canadian prairie snow. Here are the 6 to 10 feet of snow measurements that have gone through parts of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Extremely wet in Northern California as well. And then down here across parts of the southeast, this is an area that's going to continue to stay with much above average precipitation as we press forward into this forecast. We're going to talk about that a lot in here in a few moments. All right, what about weekend snowfall? Well, I'm sorry, we got a new map here. There we go. Now, this is the last 72 hours of total accumulated snowfall through last night, 6 p.m. Central Time. And I just want to take note here that when you look at the Sierra Nevada mountains and see easily over 48 inches, we had some places here that did pick up 10 feet, and it did get on kind of the Reno side of the Sierra Nevada as well, and there's even a bit more snow forecast there. But this added more to the northern Rockies, part of the central Rockies. Look at Montana coming out into North Dakota. And of course, even though this map has a pretty hard boundary at the 49th parallel, this snow did get up into this area as well. Now, thinking about all of this, I want to come back to that "what have you done for me lately" idea, because winter may look like this. That is the whole winter in terms of precipitation ranks. Now, some folks let me just put this to a point here. I got people in Minnesota going, "Are you serious? We had our fourth wettest winter here. We didn't have any snow. When did all this happen?" Well, this all happened before Christmas. This map goes from November 30th to March 3rd. And so it's just important to understand that the drier conditions that the northern plains, upper Midwest endured this winter came in major fits and spurts. And when we did get big precipitation events, you can lose that moisture just as fast as you get it. That's what the hydrologic cycle does. Same thing for Iowa. I think there's a lot of Iowan farmers right now that are extremely worried about this upcoming growing season because that blizzard came through and it did a lot. Remember the big one that we had back in January? I mean, it just dumped snow. We had 2 feet of it in places. And did we get to keep all of that moisture? Well, some of it, yes, but not all of it. You look up the East Coast, extremely wet. Look at the Mid-South, drier. Southwest, drier. And then I've been telling you for a while, the northern Rockies, the Cascades need a lot more snow. But you're going, wait a minute, these graphics look like they've been wet. Well, it's all about the timing of these precipitation events. And that's what's going to bring me to one of my big vulnerabilities in terms of the weather pattern over the next 90 days. And it's this. You go back to December 2nd and you say, what did our 100 centimeter soil moisture look like? And while the west, parts of West, especially California, have brought all of their soil moisture up with major precipitation events, the reservoirs are full. This area throughout the Midwest, Mid-South, lower Mississippi River Valley, the Delta, this whole region has been dealing with multiple kind of year-on-year drought events. Now, they've been coming on mainly in fall. We've had back-to-back major fall droughts in this area. So you say, well, what did winter do? Winter's got it here. You see, at 100 centimeters, the soil moisture change is much slower than it is at the surface. And you say, well, what's the vulnerability? This has to change. If we're going to see a successful growing season, we've got to see the hydrologic cycle repeatedly providing the precipitation side of it, minimizing the evaporation side of it to shove this moisture down here, which means you also have to have unfrozen soil. And I'm going to be watching this very carefully just because it's our largest standout region of dry conditions. Now, because of what happened at the end of February, the Mississippi River is back down here at a lower level. And it's about, 6 feet, 7 feet above low stage. So the river, we're not back in the danger area here, but upstream, like where the Illinois River, maybe the Missouri River, all come into the Mississippi, some lower flows in those rivers, because how dry it's been, has started to back this off. Now, you know that I've made a projection that we're going to be doing something like this for a while. I don't think, based upon current evidence and, of course, snowfall, that we're going to go way up here and have major flooding. We don't have all the snowpack in the northern branches, northern tributaries of the Mississippi. So just another point to take here about the speed and pace of this hydrologic cycle. So then we get here, our new drought monitor. And the drought monitor, remember, is not designed to keep up with that short-term rapid overturning of the hydrologic cycle. It's designed to keep track of the longer-term changes in the hydrologic cycle. So it's not a flash drought or flash flood tool, but it does do a very good job at keeping track of these longer-term hydrologic issues. So here you go. This is our latest map. And what I love to do with this is I love to come over here to the Maps tab and look at change maps. This just looks at the recent changes. So take note, much of the Mississippi Valley here into the Great Lakes, pockets throughout the Red River Valley, but also here in the northern tributaries to the Mississippi, just in the last week have seen a 1-class degradation in drought. We've also seen the drought getting worse in parts of North Carolina, even though there's this beautiful low sitting off the coast today that's going to go right over the top of this region. Now, if we change this and say, well, what about since the beginning of winter? So let's go back 9 weeks on this. Excuse me, not the beginning of winter, but the beginning of the new year. There's a few areas that we are watching very carefully for drought that has been expanding to worry if it's going to continue. So, what could be the catalyst for change? Because certainly this pattern is going to continue to be active for at least the next 7 to 10 days. We got to watch this. This animation is most critical to right now. Now, pay close attention to this because I think the subtleties in what I'm about to share with you are critical. The split is here, okay? And in winter, right now, that split happening between Hawaii and the Aleutian Islands, so here's Hawaii, here's the Aleutian Islands, is allowing for the polar branch of the jet stream to dip, the subtropical branch of the jet stream to survive, and they're coming across the United States with some sort of a trajectory west to east or southwest to northeast. As long as that split stays, we are in good shape for this. So we're going to watch that in just a few seconds. Now, keep this idea floating in the back of your head because I want to show you something. If that split, the one that you see here, starts to move in this direction and we split over the west, I don't like what that means for colder conditions getting back into the southeast. In the middle of summer, if that split comes right in through here and lives from the Baja of California to British Columbia, it's going to storm like mad in the Corn Belt and excessive heat and drought builds into the west. And you see that the split in the jet is always critical to monitor, and 1,000 different things influence it. Right now, I could attribute most of the behavior of the split in this jet stream to the MJO's position way over north of Australia, which is here, which is helping to accelerate these winds. So there's heat and momentum being exhausted from the atmosphere. It's off the map almost, and it's helping to create this. If that MJO moves way out here into phase 7 and phase 8 and phase 1, you just take the split with it. And what that can eventually do is drive the risk of colder air east, which we know is important to assess in spring, and change these precipitation patterns up. So I'm going to be living in this idea for a while, trying to figure this out. Excuse me. That little guy right there has got me intrigued, though, too. Now, this is a completely different scenario, but we're going to watch that one slide right up the coast later today, helping to relieve some of the drought. But we'll pick out these other features here in a few minutes. Now, here's some kind of big and fun news. You know that I have occasionally shown you on the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, the ECMWF, their website, the data from their artificial intelligence and machine learning models. But I kind of mentioned I found the color bars not useful and the projections were problematic for me. Well, they released all of that on Friday. Or was it Friday or the day before? I don't know. Late last week, they released all of this data to the public. And I worked on Friday night to start to get it mapped for you, and I've been testing it over the weekend. Now, I do plan to make some changes to my website, agweather.com, and I'm going to switch to a different projection. I'll make another note of this in a few moments. But this will likely be the new projection that I start to use. And the reason for that is that when it comes to the speed of making these weather forecast maps, the projection matters, and the manner in which I handle the data matter. And I want to go to a uniform system. To be honest, I built agweather.com for me a long time ago, and I'm glad that it's being used a lot by a lot of you. But with the addition of this and the changes I'm going to make in terms of the speed at which I create maps, I'm going to make some changes, and it'll be great. I think you will all love it. You'll also be able to see a whole lot more regional analysis because of the speed of map making. Okay, sorry about all that. You've been staring at the new 10-day forecast from European Models AI system. And this is some good news in here. This is going to be flooding. Sierra Nevada get a break, but Northern California, Oregon, parts of Washington don't. The problem is drier regions in through here and the high plains, which means the pattern is moving. We're using the Rocky Mountains to extend a rain shadow, and that means the likelihood of lows curling up and living on the front range has been diminished. But here and up the East Coast, we're looking wet, and we need to talk about it. So exciting and fun things coming. Thank you to the Europeans for making this available for free right now. Okay, with all that, here we go. This is today's all hazards map. Early this morning, winter storm warnings, winter weather advisories in the west, wind chill watch that's up here in the northern part of Montana. We still have the winter weather advisories because it's still snowing north of this. Winter storm warning in this part of the Colorado Basin as well. Fog down south. To see it all take shape, let's go ahead and look at our 3-day risk of strong to severe storms. Each day has a marginal risk, but we're going to watch a lingering frontal boundary right in through here today that could prompt some stronger thunderstorms. So given all of that, let's go watch it. Early this morning, so this was around 1 a.m. when the model was run, this is where we still had some snow coming out of Manitoba into Ontario. There's my little low curling up along the Carolina coast, but watch the west too as we play through early today. So as that low leaves the domain of the NAM model and gets out here into the Hudson Bay, the frontal boundary will be stretching right in through this area. So if we get into this afternoon and this evening, so this is by 10 o'clock tonight, that'll be the area on which we're going to keep that front alive and kicking and possibly producing some stronger storms. Meanwhile, look where our low moved. Right over this part, like Cape Hatteras of North Carolina. It's moving into Virginia and Maryland and Delaware, delivering rain, which is desperately needed. And this part of Northern California and Oregon getting hit with some very heavy snow. So playing into early Tuesday morning, that front continues to press east. There's a low that forms right here along the boundary between the Gulf of Mexico and the southern coast of the United States. Watch this low roll over the southeast, and that's going to deliver another round of rain into parts of the southeast, getting up into the mid-Atlantic that need it. The mid-Atlantic needs it. The southeast, you're going to have a lot of rain coming your way. Now, that is not to ignore this little piece of the jet stream, which hits California and Oregon first, which then sneaks out on Tuesday into Wednesday into the northern plains again, adding more snow to our area that's been in a snow deficit up here in the northern plains and southern Canadian prairie. To go from there, though, I got to pick this up with the comparison between the GFS and the European. Now, what will be changing is the projection of this. So I'm going to go to a more common projection scheme like this one versus the one that you just saw here, which is probably more representative of the geography, but that projection change I make in the models requires time when I plot the maps, and we need to get more maps out faster. So we'll just see if the change goes forward easily, and we'll talk about it in each video. Okay, here we are, Tuesday into Wednesday. There's that same little snow that comes through here. Where do we get by the time we're later this week? Now, later this week, the models finally have begun to agree on the pace and timing of this low that's expected to come out right here in this part of the central U.S. towards the mid-south, Midwest. Now, this is Friday morning. Now, this guy I watched all weekend because as we play into Saturday of this week and towards Sunday, the models had attempted in the weekend runs to curl this thing up into a tight low, producing, well, I guess what would be our second nor'easter of the entire year hitting New England. Now, today's model runs are a little different, and we expect that. There will be a system this upcoming weekend that's going to hit New England. I cannot even begin to tell you what the snow is going to be. I don't know. It's very difficult to figure that out. But what we do know is this is going to start probably in the front range here. So Colorado, the panhandles may get some snow out of this. It then rolls over the Ohio Valley, drags a bunch of rain through the southeast late this week into this weekend, and then hits New England. And when that happens, what follows it? Another system here in the Pacific Northwest. So that takes you out there about a full week in the models. And I just want to let you know, we expect more activity going through the 12th, 13th, and 14th as well, as more flow comes off the Pacific through the Northwest into the central United States. So let's go ahead and add it up using the dynamical model, the European here, and let's play it all forward. So as we get out here, that is a week right there. Now, notice we need this here. This is going to be too much. Sierra Nevada get a break, but this area of California is going to get quite a bit more precip. Look at New England, drier spots. How do we compare that to the GFS? So just imagine I'll have the European operational, I'll have the European AI, and the GFS to all look at once, and we'll be able to do something where we compare all three of them. So what you've got here is the newest comparison between the GFS and Euro. Remember, these colors where the Euro's wetter, these are where the GFS is wetter. And it's a bit of a mess with these next couple of systems in this part of the country. So it's good to look at, but understand it's going to be a bit of a mess. We ask how much of that's going to be snow. On the European model, taking it out a week, which is right there, this will be the hardest area to forecast. But snow in the front range, we're going to be seeing heavy snows coming out of this part of California, Oregon, sliding right across Idaho over toward Yellowstone. Some of this is now, some of this is coming with the systems later this week. And maybe little skiffs of snow getting through this area. Is it in the GFS? Kind of. The GFS is much more aggressive on a snowfall event right here in parts of Wisconsin that's coming Friday into Saturday. We got to wait to see that because that is not currently in the European forecast as to being that much snow. I'm talking 5 to 10 inches versus a few inches here in the Euro. Again, that's this upcoming weekend. That's Friday into Saturday. All right. So what we need to do is we need to look at the probabilities. And the chance of getting an inch, well, there's that system. So you got your heaviest snows that are here. I'm talking about anything outside of the mountains. So heavy snows here in the Canadian prairie. More here, big question mark for New England. So if we step this up to 3 inches, there's your probability for 3 inches. And here's the probability for 6. Now this will be a tough one. But out here, there's another foot. And here's 18. On the wet and dry side of this, our newest update for the next 10 days on the probability of getting less than 1/10 of an inch. We now see that this part of Alberta, getting into Saskatchewan, over here into parts of Montana, into the Dakotas, this whole very northern but western plains area is looking pretty dry. So thank goodness we just brought in some snow into this region. This has shrunk a bit, but it's still quite dry into this area compared to average. The wetter side of things, if we step this up to 1 inch or more, is primarily going to be the coasts, southeast, up the east coast, and then here. So this is the chance of getting it over 1 inch. We desperately need this in this area. But if we go to 2 inches, you start to see probabilities of 90% of getting 2 inches of rain down here, coast up here. That's the chance of 4. So this is where I'm discussing the risk of flooding. So overall, what's the pattern doing? Can we come back to what we started with? There will be change because this split right now, so there it is forecast. Watch right where I just drew. By the time we get into this weekend, so here's the 9th, the 10th, and 11th, that split begins to fade. The jet extends. And as the jet tries to make this little extension, it's going to change the pattern for the western United States. That subsequently changes the pattern for everybody else. Now, why did it do this? Because the MJO is likely going to move from here to about there. So the fast winds which were there now extend out to this area. If it fails to get to this spot and does a bit of a reset, then the jet will come back to living here and we'll go back to a split and we'll get the same pattern we've just recently seen in March. But as it stands, what this looks like it's going to do is give us a little bit of week 2, which would be March 11th through the 17th with some wetter conditions. But we've now started to see, especially the European first, dry out. Let me rephrase that. Become drier, not dry out, but become a bit drier, less active here. But the GFS still hangs on to more active pattern into week 2. So we will watch this transition all week as well. The other thing we'll be paying close attention to is the temperatures, because our 7-day frost outlook in gray here shows you a lot of mild conditions coming up in this area. And because winter finished like this, which with much of the upper Midwest, the northern plains, and also New England showing with one of their warmest winters on record, and the arrival of very warm conditions as of late has our National Phenology Network Spring Leaf Index Anomaly Map. I love this one, showing us that spring is arriving in these areas here up to 20 days early. Now this is going to reset, but did you see that at the end? And certainly today, our soil temperatures by this afternoon, we will have 60-degree soil temperatures. Let me rephrase that. 50 degree Fahrenheit soil temperatures as far north as that line right there. Amazing to see that. So where are the temperatures going? Well, here's today's highs compared to average. Remember, it's going to be quite windy going into Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. I just want to point out that by Thursday into Friday and Saturday, the pattern seems to be still favoring brief shots at cooler air, but overall a milder bias. What's different is these forecasts getting up in the 70s and even 80s here in the central U.S. That may be behind us for a little while. Here's the day 5 through 10. So see how we're not 15 degrees warmer than average anymore, but maybe 5 to 8. And this is day 10 through 15. Now, you know my big worry about this pattern. Is anything going to shove this cold air out and get it to live in the south, southeast, mid-south, east coast because of how warm things have been here as of late? Well, do you notice how we're starting to get a bit of a warm-up in the west? All right. That could mean that there could be a temporary pattern shift that by mid to late March does introduce some cooler air east after such a warm go of it. Now, it's not showing up in either model right now. Let me just take you all the way out to the end. This is the day 10 through 15 from the European, which gets us all the way out there to the 19th of March. I'm not seeing long duration deep freezes coming, but we can't ignore this. And the reason why we can't ignore this is primarily because of the MJO. Same discussion. It's out. It's in phase 4 north of Australia, and it's expected to sweep around. Any time that it lives over here gives us the risk of redistributing the temperatures across North America. Right now it's cool west, warm east. If it gets over here for a while, that pushes the jet farther to the east. The split happens closer to the west coast. The west coast gets a ridge and warms up. The east coast goes over trough. See that? So that's why we're going to watch this. The new European weeklies, though, say probably going to crash back into null, which means we may just narrowly skirt past the risk of getting some colder air into the southeast for any sort of long duration. As it stands, this is your mid-March to mid-April forecast. Notice how much drier it's gone for the west. Better rains are forecast by the European model in the western high plains. Every ounce of this is needed right now. Okay? Still wet over the southeast, but this may mean some very early planting windows do try to open up in parts of the Midwest. But the concern I have is over the temperatures. Because if you look out there at the end of that time frame, so this is like the second week of April, we're not getting the strong, warm signals that we've had in February and early March. And we're going to watch this carefully. It has trended warmer, but we have to watch this carefully at the end of March through the beginning of April right here, okay? It's still quite cool in the west in this pattern, but that's what I'll keep a close eye on. All right, I want to show you something, and I'm going to pick on the Corn Belt today because that was where all my questions came from over the weekend. This is the primary corn and soybean belt precipitation time series from 1895 to last year, and the time period over which we look is June to August. Now, if you look, there is actually an upward trend since 1970. How much? About 1.5 inches. So the whole of the corn and soybean belt from just July to August has been on average wetter by about 1.5 inches to 2 inches during June, July, and August. But there is questions about this, 12. What about 91 or 88? And I've been getting asked, well, you did this analysis for 12. Can you look at these other years? And so I want to do that for you because we looked last time at this. And I made a case that if the water stays cool in this reverse C shape, that is most influential on determining where the split will be, keeping it way out here versus along the coast, ultimately determining the speed of the jet stream, the momentum of the atmosphere, and the likelihood of drought in the middle part of the country. So we looked at 2012 last time. But I got questions. What about 88? 88 was full-blown La Nina developing in that same reverse C. Do you see the overall pattern? You say, what about some of those other drier years like 91? Cool water here showing up by July. Still some cooler water in the Gulf of Alaska and a fading El Nino. But we had some help with this year in the Atlantic with the Bermuda High leaving as well. We can then say, well, give me another one. What about 2002? That was another extremely hot one in the Midwest. Well, do you see it? Cool water reverse C right there, especially off the Baja of California. Let's keep going. What about 2022? Well, remember, we were coming out of La Nina, and there was still cold water lingering in this area. And what about last year, 2023? Still cold water lingering in this area. But remember, the drought last year was primarily due to the Bermuda High leaving and going off to Europe for a while. And during that time, much warmer water built into this region. And that is what gave us later, after June, more storms in this section of the country that weren't there in May and June. So you see, there's always the risk if these waters are cold. That is the case I'm trying to build. Now, what do we call that? We call that that's part of what we call the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. And it's in this oscillation, let's see if we can kind of zoom in here on the end of this. If we look at this oscillation from like 11 and 12 versus 14, 15, 16, 17, and where we've been as of late, the question is, it's kind of 5 years on, 5 years off. That's why it's decadal. There's a whole loop in there. And so we are wanting to know, what are these ocean temperatures going to do now, and are we on the way back up? Because whenever it's down like this, the midsection of the country has risk. Whenever it's up like this, the west has risk of drought. See that? So where are we? We're here. Transition time. And I'm just going to tell you, if you are a Midwestern farmer, let me rephrase that. If you are in this area, east of the Rocky Mountains, these ocean temperatures are going to be critical. Because right now, you can see where they are. They're just living on the edge, aren't they? If over the next 60 to 90 days, in every video, I keep showing these, and they get colder and colder and colder and stay colder, then we do have the risk of the PDO going back into its more negative phase, meaning that the West has lower risk of heat and drought, and the East and Central have greater risk of heat and drought. I mean, that's it. That's what we're going to be watching. That's my only clue. tomorrow, on the 5th, I get brand new long-range forecast data that'll tell me what the models are suggesting this is going to do. That will be critical as well, because you'll see the models will respond in their precipitation patterns here to what's going on here and in El Nino. So that's it. Watch it with me. Quickly, South America, big storms in Argentina over the weekend. Some big hailers down here. I don't know how much damage just yet, but I know there were big storms down there. If you look over the next 10 days, cooler in Argentina, that's the map on the left, for the next 10 days, a little bit warmer in Brazil, but most of Brazil and Argentina go over warmer beyond that. And if we slide up here and take a look at the precipitation patterns, we continue to see coming out of the Amazon into Brazil's center-west area, drier conditions. Better storms forecast out there. Days 7 through 10 in Buenos Aires, one of the areas that's been drier, but the wetter conditions stay along the Paraná River Basin. Near normal rains here. The new long-range models backed off a little bit on the extent of how far into Brazil this dryness was going to make it. Must watch that carefully. That is my key thing to be watching in terms of drought risk on the safrinha crop going forward. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you for watching with me today. We'll pick it up again tomorrow. Thanks.